Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Don't Praise the Machine, your definitive survivor's guide to the cultural apocalypse. Now, listeners, in recent weeks, we've had a couple of media moments involving footage of past and present celebrities interacting with law enforcement in the United States of America. We've seen the long-awaited release of Justin Timberlake's Hamptons body cam footage, which honestly just looks like a man trying to remember if he's Justin Timberlake or a very confused tourist. And then there's Afroman, who basically turned a police raid into a viral comedy track by using his own home surveillance as a music video. It sparked a bit of a theme for us this week. Cops on camera. We're diving into the history of the tech and the absolute chaos of how recording law enforcement went from grainy VHS dash cams to the culturally ever-present high-definition chest-eye view of a police officer involved in an interaction. But before we explore these angles, I have to summon my partner in crime. He's currently broadcasting from his Brunswick bunker, where he spends his day nervously checking his Ring doorbell cam, convinced the local magpies are plotting against him. Here's John, motion detected Maloney. John, have you checked the perimeter today, buddy?
Beautiful. I love that. Yeah, I'm always nervously checking the perimeter, testing my tripwires, making sure my safe room door is secure, all that stuff. You got to do it. I've made a lot of enemies in Brunswick.
You absolutely have got that cute little neighborhood of yours has got some absolute menaces coming up, and you've made your home look like the embassy of a nation. The embassy of a nation that is not beloved by the people. This is what I always notice in whenever I visit foreign cities. You often see nations that are have a little bit more of a complicated relationship with the host nation. Those embassies are just always like fortresses, or just the U.S. embassy is always the U.S. I'm thinking of the U.S. and the British embassy, particularly in Berlin, are just these fucking fortresses.
I know. I always kind of go past these sort of nothing embassies and think, man, that'd be a good job, wouldn't it? Just being like, if you were the kind of working at the embassy of Lesotho in Berlin, you'd be like, fuck, this is great. You know, I just get to hang out in Germany, got a decent wage.
That's right.
Nothing's ever going to really happen here. We might have like a cocktail event every year with with some German attaches or whatever. And then we'll just be dicking around, getting people's passports fixed and stuff.
Yeah, and it's famously the way that you get a cushy ambassador job is that you donate in the US to one of the candidates, and then when they become the president, they go, oh, yeah, you donated $2 million to Obama's campaign, and he's now president, so he's going to make you the ambassador too, and then they just like some Caribbean island or some shit
somewhere
like
that's
that.
not going to be strategically important, but will be nice. Yeah,
it's nice for you.
Yeah.
John, you must have had a really great time this week. I sent you the Justin Timberlake video that came out very recently, the body cam footage, which is just very, very funny.
It's wonderful.
Him particularly when the officer, well, perhaps we can get into this, but also, and then Afroman, who everybody remembers from his early 2000s hit, Because I Got High. I didn't expect to see Afroman in the news ever again.
No, me neither. I had no real visual memory of what he was like. And it's fair to say that he doesn't look exactly as he did in his heyday. He's aged a little bit. I mean, it's been years and years. And the clip that I saw of Because I Got High had Jay and Silent Bob in it, which tells you something about how much time culturally has passed, how much cultural bilge water has passed under the bridge since Because I Got High. And he's very much looking like an elder statesman of entertainment. He's got a bit of a kind of late stage Bootsy Collins kind of fight to him.
Absolutely. And so
very, very, very colourful character in every way.
And he turned the tables on the police officers because he said, hey, you guys don't always get to be in control of footage of police interactions because I have recorded you raiding my home. I'm going to turn it into a music video for my fans. So we will get to that. But what we thought we would
satisfying stuff.
Very satisfying stuff.
Yeah.
We need your law angle at the end of the episode, John, when we talk about Afroman. But yeah, we thought this would be a good opportunity to talk a little bit about the ways that technology has interacted with law enforcement, camera technology in particular. And I guess in particular, we're thinking about the United States because that body cam footage has just become so ubiquitous in culture that we thought it would be an interesting thing to explore today in light of Justin Timberlake and Afroman. And it actually made me think, John, it's so ubiquitous that when the OpenAI video platform, rest in peace, we just found out Sora, they're not going to be doing that anymore. But when Sora 2 first launched and people were creating these incredible AI-generated videos that looked real, one of the things that people were creating were body cam type footages, and so you were seeing lots and lots of videos of like police pulling over cats that were driving cars, or other like hilarious interactions. And it worked so well for Sora because it was sort of grainy footage, and Sora is better at convincing you that it was real if it's not not necessarily grainy, but just that almost like fisheye lens look of a cat being pulled over and the cop asking him about whether he's been drinking or not. And I just thought, wow, this has really just become a thing that we completely recognize. Apparently, the first experiments with cameras in police vehicles in the United States, there's apparently an article from 1939 of a police officer who had strapped a film camera to his dashboard as a bit of isn't this sort of interesting? And then it wasn't until the 1980s when VHS video camcorder technology started to become widely available and more affordable that actually some video enthusiast police officers, this was not at the behest of their department or because of any type of law, there was like a guy who built a rig and strapped a VHS rig, like it looks like a big old Sony camcorder, or it's almost like a studio camera, and he has this all these bars to make sure that it sits in the front of the police car.
I see. So it's kind of so that it's stable because it's like a big chunky old-fashioned camera.
Yeah, exactly. And then when he would start pursuing somebody, he'd hit record on the thing, and he captured what they think was the first arrest from a dash cam, because he'd basically like invented the dash cam, and apparently his the captain of the force or whatever said to him, "Oh, this might be a little bit of history," because they were watching the footage back, and you're seeing what we now recognize is it's so familiar to us, but you're seeing through the windshield of the car, and he is arresting a man after they pursued him. And it's like the first time that anybody had seen anything like this on camera. Seeing the suspect in handcuffs on his own vehicle in front of the police car. And then in the 90s, actually, companies started to produce police dash cam technology. So it became a thing that realized there was a demand for the police for evidence and I guess mainly
probably like police scrutiny and so on.
Exactly. Yeah. Scrutiny and evidence. They could, training purposes, of course. So then companies started making dash cam footage. So before we had body cams, dash cam footage was the thing, because if you imagine this technology was big, almost like VCR. VCR size technology was what was available to get footage on tapes. So you couldn't strap that to an officer yet. So this is why dashboard cams were the precursor to the body cam.
And they'd be like pretty chunky, sitting up on the dashboard, basically.
Exactly.
Like a kind of rigged up, and as you say, sort of stabilized so that they could get the footage. Yeah. But then, so what you would see, and it becomes so familiar, hasn't it? That idea of seeing the front of a car and then seeing like maybe an officer come up one side and his second in command come up the other side and sort of mill around, get some guy to step out, put his hands on the bonnet and check his pockets and then cuff him and whatever. But it's so weird to think that that was going on. I mean, of course, it was going on for decades and decades before we had any live footage of it. So, you know, all those kind of old cop films that you see, I mean, old Scorsese movies and stuff that depict those sorts of events are kind of going on. You know, they don't have the same source material that we have, like thousands of hours of now. If we want to see, you know, if we want to have, how would I depict somebody getting arrested, or how would I depict somebody resisting arrest, or, you know, how would I depict a cop getting back up or whatever? That's all just there to watch, whereas it wouldn't have been, you know, 30 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we as soon as you think of this, I particularly think of the ones in the evening where you are watching a piece of footage and it's cop lights, the police lights from, you know, they're flashing, the red and blue lights are flashing on the car in front. It's nighttime. There's almost like a spotlight on the vehicle in front, and exactly, you see the police mill around and then they say, you know, please step out of the vehicle, sir. And then, you know, often the reason you're watching one of those videos is because there's some sort of altercation that's about to take place, and that's the reason why that's an interesting piece of footage that has got out. You're sort of tense because, you know, there's a tension in all those videos, because it's like you know, you're watching the police interact with members of the public and you just go, oh fuck, this is a tense situation. Particularly in the US, you're like, oh, somebody's going to get shot for sure. Somebody's going to get shot here for sure.
That's right.
A lot of guns and a lot of hair triggers.
And previously there was, like, it would have been a lot harder to capture routine policing in particular. I remember seeing a couple of things, not at the time because I'm too young, but, you know, for example, Richard Ramirez, who was a serial killer, was caught, was recognized in public, and because there were all these wanted posters of him, and then was basically pursued by a bunch of, like, a mob of kind of civilians who were like, you're that guy. And the newspapers, the news TV anchors obviously got producers got wind of it. So they went down there and filmed him kind of escaping an angry mob and getting arrested or whatever. So something of that magnitude that the news is onto quick enough, you would get kind of live footage of. Or there's another famous incident in 1968 where the Democratic National Convention got mobbed by all these so-called yippies who were like these, you know, people like Abby Hoffman and these kind of sort of, you know, violent hippies basically, who had foreshadowed that they were going to show up at the National Convention and cause shit. And so there were all these cameras there and floodlighting and everything because they were covering the National Convention. And you end up with an early example of kind of very raw footage of rioting and people getting arrested and cops dispersing tear gas and all this sort of shit, which was incredibly shocking to people at the time because, again, they just didn't, you know, they didn't have that kind of context. But you didn't have kind of the sort of, you know, lovely low-level policing that we might see now on maybe a dedicated TikTok account where someone goes, you were moving a bit quick there, and they just get their license. Maybe the person gives them a bit of lip, but it's all fine. You know,
that would be
nobody's covering that.
That would be an excellent ASMR YouTube channel. Just police interactions that go well, and actually maybe the person just gets a warning.
Exactly.
And has a pleasant chat with.
Sorry, I was distracted by something. That's okay. We all get a bit distracted sometimes. I can see you haven't got any demerit points, so I'll let you off with a warning. Thank you, officer.
And there you go. I can't sleep without this.
Exactly. And suddenly it splices in. Am I being detained? Am I being detained? You get one of those sovereign citizens. Incidentally, it's a strange day to be recording this episode in Victoria because our very own sovereign citizen has been fatally apprehended by the cops after 7 months he got killed this morning.
Holy shit.
I couldn't believe that he was still alive. This guy, for anyone who hasn't been following it, I don't think it's been, you know, international news particularly, but this guy called Desi Freeman who was a kind of so-called sovereign citizen character, who was apprehended or attempted to be served with a warrant about 7 months ago. Things escalated. He killed 2 police, I think, and injured a third, or maybe even killed 3 and injured a fourth, and then disappeared into the bush in kind of country Victoria, quite remote part of country Victoria. And the cops, launched what is probably the biggest manhunt in Victorian history, looking for this guy. And most people after a couple of months were like, well, he's just, he'll just be in a crevice somewhere, he'll just have died in the bush and they'll take ages to find him or maybe never find him, but he's gone. But sure enough, he was still out there being harboured by someone at a farm in northern Victoria, it looks like, and they've somehow found him. And there was a standoff this morning. And sadly, I don't think we've got body-worn camera footage of that. But
is there body cam? There might be body cam footage of this.
There may well be, yeah. There might be. I think there is actually, when they were doing kind of background on this guy, because he's obviously one of these people who's had a few run-ins with the cops. There was some body-worn camera footage of his, which is just, again, it's just kind of become part of our information diet, something that you kind of expect to see if there's like a character who's had a number of run-ins with the cops. And when that Justin Timberlake footage came on, it's not like anyone needed a little explainer saying what you're about to see is, a camera mounted on a police officer's body. Everyone just sees that and immediately knows what they're looking at, which is kind of a relatively new thing. And of course, it gives you this sort of very distinctive, like chest eye view of someone's interactions.
Yeah.
So it's like a very short cameraman is following the proceedings or something.
It's strange too, because you don't see the police officer. You only see the suspect in any of this kind of stuff. You just see the person who's been pulled over, which also gives it a kind of weird power
it
dynamic
does.
kind of thing, where there's the police officer has their anonymity, but the person who is having the interaction doesn't. I was thinking as well, the first thing I think about when I think about technology and police interacting with members of the public was the Rodney King incident in 1991.
Yeah,
where you had,
I was thinking that too.
Which then resulted in the LA riots of 91, where you had Rodney King, who was an African-American man who was pulled over by the police or arrested, and then they violently assaulted him unprovoked, as I seem to recall. And somebody happened to be by a bystander with a camcorder and recorded the whole thing.
Right. I was going to ask how that ended up being filmed. Yeah.
Okay. And then the police officers, I think, said, perhaps not knowing that it had been filmed, or maybe perhaps it was just written up in a police report as, this person resisted arrest and blah, 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 blah. And then somebody had this footage, and the footage was either given to the media or I don't know how it got its way into the media. And there was just clear footage showing that the police story was like bullshit, or that they had been, completely inappropriate in their, reaction and escalation or whatever. And then, it became this kind of a racial thing
which of course makes you think like, fucking hell, how many times is that happening?
Exactly.
Pre-cameras.
Exactly.
That people just have a story, no one believes them, and the cops are like, bullshit, you resisted arrest. Or, someone dies and they say, well, he pulled out a gun and we had to shoot him. I mean, who the fuck knows,
There've even been, I watched in preparation for this episode, funnily enough, the John Oliver program, which I'm not normally a huge fan of, but he just 3 weeks ago did an episode on body cams, and that was really useful for this particular episode. And he was showing that even in the case of there being body cams now, that police officers still try and like game the system a little bit, and that he had some footage of police officers like screaming it. There was a guy who just like lay down on the ground immediately when the police said, you're under arrest, and he just like gets down on the ground and puts his hand behind his back, and all 3 police officers, or there's several of them, they keep shouting, stop resisting when he's clearly not resisting. I think so it probably gives them more leeway to like rough him up, or if anything happens, they can just be like, oh yeah, but obviously he was resisting because all 3 of us are screaming.
That's so weird, isn't it? Because I was reading about the effect that it has on police conduct and the kind of reduced number of complaints that tend to follow from the introduction of body worn cameras in particular jurisdictions. So you'll get the implication is you get a kind of modification of police conduct because they know they're being watched, which is, a bit. It's kind of unfortunate that is the case, but it's also, I guess, part of what it's for. But then, you get this strange attempt, as you say, to kind of, I don't know, maybe there's legitimate circumstances where you could turn it off, or you could pretend that it malfunctioned, or you could be,
that's right.
It's just reminding me of Tim and Eric's GoPro show where Eric keeps standing in the corner and Tim's like, you can't just stand in the corner, because he's just getting footage of nothing.
Fuck, I haven't watched that episode in ages. I'll have to. I love that bit, that whole bit.
So good. The other thing that's the kind of piece of the puzzle here is the show that you and I grew up watching. Sometimes it'd be on late at night. You'd have a hot cup of cocoa. You'd watch Letterman, and then you'd switch over to watch Cops, which I realized, to my amazement, is still going. Is now in its 37th season. There's 1,247 episodes, and I've only seen about 100, so I've got plenty of backlog to watch. Started in '89, so we were seeing it in its first decade growing up, but that was kind of amazing too, because it kind of gave you this, it was particularly amazing as somebody growing up in a relatively small, safe city in Australia to get this weird little window into kind of what was happening at 2:00 in the morning in South Central LA or something, and these kind of slightly dodgy arrests of people with, crack pipes or people with guns on their dashboards or whatever. It was just like a different world. But I think that, it was obviously massively influential. I remember it being kind of lampooned in The Simpsons, and that was part of what kind of got police footage into popular culture, I guess, and that kind of, that kind of sense of live action policing becoming a familiar fixture.
Yeah, and and in the case of you have Cops, which again, that sort of normalized police officers and police interactions being filmed, but of course that again is more or less from the perspective of the police officers, even though it's a production team. And then in the case of Rodney King, you have the Rodney King incident. It's one of the first times that it's not just your word against theirs coming up against the police department, who are obviously a lot more powerful than just the average individual. So it's citizens wrestling back some of that power and at least being able to say, hey, look, this is actually what happened. We have some video footage of it, of our own, that we've taken with the camcorder, or
in the case of Afroman, with home security footage,
with home security cameras, and of course everybody's got their phones now. George Floyd, there's both body cam footage from Derek Chauvin and also the people that filmed that arrest. So then you have the first generation of body cams coming out in the 2000s as distinct from dashboard cams, but these things are very bulky. They have terrible battery life, and they were seen as a bit of like a tech gimmick. And they were being trialed in both the UK and the US. And then in the mid 2000s, you have like Ferguson and the death of Michael Brown, and there's more public pressure from should police officers wear body cams, to like, this is definitely something that needs to be happening, so that we just have a bit of a better sense of what actually happened during these interactions. And then from between 2015 and 2020, there's like a rapid adoption. It's not compulsory in all American states. It's not mandated everywhere. Like states that do mandate it: California, New York, Texas, and Florida. And the way they work, actually, I saw this from the John Oliver show. The way the body cams work is they're more or less always recording, and when you hit the button to record as a police officer, that's when it will actually start saving it to the hard disk or to the
right.
and it also can even go back like a couple of minutes or whatever. So if something happened before you hit save, it'll start doing it. So but there are obviously times when you shouldn't have it on, like if the police officer is going to the bathroom, or if they're interacting with undercover officers or informants or other things like this.
Okay, interesting.
And now we're just used to seeing these body cams everywhere, and then
I think it should be mandatory for just ordinary people to wear body cams, so I can watch them just going about their day.
That's Kick. That's Kick, John.
It's true.
That's Clavicular on Kick.
Oh, God.
And it's much better than a body cam. It's like a three-camera.
Do you know why Justin Timberlake? Because that arrest was obviously, I mean, you made a wonderful short out of it, didn't you?
Yeah.
And that was some time ago. So obviously there's been a bit of a delay, and suddenly this footage has come to light.
I have it here. So the incident's June 2024, Justin Timberlake's Sag Harbor stop. So he got pulled over in, I think Sag Harbor's in the Hamptons, and he got pulled over by a police officer because he was driving erratically. And then that went to, I think it didn't even go to trial. I think he did a plea deal, and it was so tiny. The thing he got was like his license was suspended for 90 days, and he had to pay, I think, a $500 fine, and he had to do 25 hours of community service, which is always funny to think about. Like, you're on the litter picking line with Justin Timberlake, and he had to do some sort of statement about not drink driving.
Fancy dance moves and skewering Coke cans with his little pick-uppy thing.
That's right. But then I think the media must have done a request for the footage and said, what's it called, like a freedom of information kind of thing, or whatever, because obviously that's going to be very valuable footage to media outlets. But everything came and went without the body cam footage being released. Again, 2024, and then what was it, last week or the week before the footage was released? I think his lawyers had argued against it and said, no, it's going to be embarrassing, blah, blah, blah. And then for whatever reason, it was decided, it's in the public interest. And so it came out. And what's just very funny about it, to anyone who hasn't seen the body cam footage of Justin Timberlake getting arrested, is the police officer pulls him over and says, do you know why I've pulled you over? And he goes, no, I don't know. And the police officer goes, oh, you were driving erratically and ignoring, some road signs. And he goes, sorry about that. And then the police officer just goes, what are you doing out here tonight? And he goes, just driving around. Oh yeah, what are you doing? I'm on tour. And the cop goes, you're on tour? What do you mean? He goes, world tour. And the cop goes, world tour? And he goes, kind of hard to explain. I'm Justin Timberlake. And then the police officer just goes, you're Justin Timberlake? He goes, yeah. And then the cop goes, can I see your ID? And then he gives it to him. And then there's some more footage actually when they get him to the station. And
isn't that, they do the kind of classic, touch your nose and walk 10 steps or whatever.
Yeah.
Which he should have aced even with a few beers on board with all of his dance training.
And he's like bad at it, and he goes, this is hard. And he keeps like fucking it up.
He's obviously pretty wasted. I mean, you can sort of see like he seems, affable and not at all aggressive or anything, but he seems like someone who's trying to keep it together, who's just absolutely ripped and kind of, is having trouble finishing pretty straightforward sentences and that kind of stuff. And obviously once he starts walking, you see it even more vividly.
And then I'm just thinking of this now, and then just last week, Tiger Woods got done for drink driving.
Of course, poor Tigers.
Again, that was this is not his first being blind behind the wheel, is it?
No, it's not at all. He just thinks, well, if I can get a birdie, surely I can get Surely I can get this car home. My driveway is much bigger than a hole in a golf course. How hard can this be?
That would be great if you said that to the police officer when police officer.
My favorite bit of, if you like, it's not footage but found audio. If you to put it one way, in Tiger Woods' saga is it's like a voicemail that he left on the phone of a woman that he was clearly having an affair with.
Yeah,
and he's saying to her, "Oh, my wife is, she's on to you basically, and so what you need to do is like delete my number."
Yeah,
and it's like he doesn't understand how phones work. It's like, how's that going to do anything? He's just, and he's obviously kind of freaking out. He's like, so just delete my number so it comes through as like a no number. And it's like, what? But your wife's going to be calling from your phone. So I don't understand how you think that works.
like, is your wife going to somehow get hold of that woman's phone and
just delete that woman from your phone? That's how you want to do it. He's just been playing golf so much that he's got
and
no
he's had
idea
minders who do all his phone stuff. So he just didn't understand.
He just
how
has
phones worked.
All of his brain has been devoted to golf and none of it to basic technology usage.
Yeah, so that was the JT
If you just
footage that was
affair.exe and press erase.
He said, I've set up a GeoCities website about this, about how I'm not having an affair. And I want you to promote that GeoCities website that I've made.
I need my visitor ticker to go over 100 views. Otherwise it looks like nobody's going to believe it.
Now, John, as our resident lawman, the final story of Cops on Cam this week. Shout out to two Don't Praisers who sent that story to me. The Afroman arrest, or a raid story rather. Shout out to Anthony and Mason who both sent it to me. How familiar are you with this story, John? Can you give people a little bit can you give people a little bit of a background about
sure,
about 2000 the year 2000 pop star Afroman from hit Because I Got High.
Yeah, so a lot of people will be familiar with that song, of course. It's an absolute classic, and it's one of those things. I was gonna do my thing, buckets up high. I was gonna play them So it's fair to say that Afroman is best known for that song. That's what all the descriptions say. He's best known for this, and I go, what else is he known for? Anything? I feel like I'm better known in other respects. But he's definitely best known for that song. And then, as far as I'm aware, not much happened in his life that was kind of making headlines for 26 years. So back in 2022, police in the Adams County Sheriff's Office raided his home on suspicion of drug trafficking and kidnapping. And apparently they had received an anonymous tip, I hope I've got this right, on the kidnapping front, that there was a kind of secret chamber or kind of an underground bunker or sealed room or, a kind of area of his house that he was using to kidnap people and keep them in. And they raided, they obviously kind of thought, well, who knows? Maybe Afroman has been up to no good. He's obviously getting high, which suggests that he's skirting the law to some extent, but it's a fair distance from there to kidnapping. So they raided his house, as I said, August 2022. This is in Ohio. And they turned up some cash and they turned up a little bit of weed, unsurprisingly, and they didn't file any charges. And rather than kind of letting that go, he had a brilliant stroke of genius and started producing. He must have a bit of a following. So he started. He does, So he started producing these music videos and songs online which were based around the footage of this raid that he had collected, I think principally from his home security system, but also because his wife filmed some of these interactions with the cops. And he really leaned into it. He started kind of repeatedly, kind of making these characters out of some of the guys that were appearing in the raid footage, and creating kind of insulting backstories and nicknames for them and things. And so he released a song called Lemon Pound Cake, which was about a particular officer who, let me just check his name.
Because the police, because the Afroman's got
Sean Cooley.
Yeah, it's a great
Sean
name.
Cooley is a kind of heavy-set guy, to say the least, who does a sort of double take when he sees some lemon pound cake in a glass cabinet in Afroman's kitchen. And so Afroman, kind of noticing this aspect of the raid footage, starts calling him Pound Cake, and creates this song about him called Lemon Pound Cake, where it says things like, he's an Adams County sheriff, he's hungry and he's big as hell, he was sniffing for weed, then he smelled another smell. And it's all about how he gets distracted by this cake. And then also during the raid, they wrecked his kind of front gate and wrecked his door. And he says that, when they did this, he asked them, are you going to help me? Like, when they turned up nothing and decided not to press charges.
Yeah.
Understand, like, quite rightly, he was like, well, can you help me fix my fucking door? And they said, no, we're not required to do that. Wow. So he wrote a song called Will You Help Me Repair My Door? About showing this footage, and then like he shows the footage of the gate, says, will you help me repair my gate? And the door, will you help me repair my door? It's very funny. And he's kind of as I said, he's got a real presence to him. He's a very loud dresser. He's got a big afro, as his name suggests. And so he's very recognizable. And then what happens is the cops, rather than sort of just, take this on the chin, they decide that he's kind of harming their reputations. He's apparently, like, I'm sure that a lot of them are getting sent these videos and people are sort of mocking them in the street, and, probably other police officers are giving them a lot of shit about it and using these nicknames and whatever. So they decide to, I guess the kind of Ohio prosecutors decides to kind of put him on trial for what I think was basically kind of, similar to sort of defamation, like ruining these people's reputations and exposing them to, so defamation, I think, and some associated charges brought
If I could just chuck this one bit, John, I love talking about the defamation. Well, one of the videos jokingly suggested that the wife of one of the officers, Randall Waters Jr., this is from The Guardian, one of the videos jokingly suggested that the wife of one of the officers, Randolph Walters Jr., had a sexual relationship with Afroman, who then was quoted as saying, "It's caused tremendous pain in my life," Walters Jr. said. I've been with that woman since middle school. I would hope she wouldn't, but you know what? Once someone puts it out there for their fun and entertainment, it's out there, and it's a problem. I'm not sure what he's suggesting, that somehow he's through like, Afroman.
Well, maybe she did. Why would he make a song about it if it hadn't happened?
or she didn't have that idea in her head now, but now my wife is obsessed with having sex with Afroman, and so I need to be compensated.
That's right. So that's kind of what happened. And then, more recently, so March 18th, a jury starts deliberating. They only take 6 hours to rule entirely in favor of Afroman, real name Joseph Foreman, I should have said. And that followed from a kind of long running trial where he was, he's turning up to trial in this incredible, what looks like a kind of custom fitted American flag suit. And it's a bit like the kind of People versus Larry Flint sort of vibe. Like, he became this sort of personification of free speech, because he was more or less saying, this is a form of satire. It's my artistic response to this event, which was an unjustified raid on my property, as it turned out, because, you know, it didn't result in me being charged with anything and I'm innocent. And they damaged my property, and they took some money, and apparently they miscounted the money so that he didn't end up getting much back as was taken. So he's saying, well, this is an expression of free speech protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution. And he won. And the jury said after 6 hours, yeah, we're ruling entirely in your favor. And like so many people who unsuccessfully sue for defamation, the sheriffs at the Ohio Police Department, the Adams County Police Department, are now becoming familiar with the Streisand effect, because millions of people who would not really have any idea about these events are now mocking them, and their lives are worse than ever. So there you go. But I love this as as the apotheosis, if you will, of this whole thing, where somebody is using the public familiarity with kind of, you know, raid footage and using their own technology in being able to keep the police, scrutinize the police, I guess, without relying on official sources, and then turning it into a beautiful, subversive mockery of police power. And the police take the bait, which is great. You know, they should have just said, well, you know, can you not do that? Okay, well, you're going to do it. Whatever, we don't really care.
Yeah.
We're just doing our job. But they completely debase themselves by acting like sensitive Sallys and saying, oh, this is all really hurtful.
And was it just a cash grab? Because they wanted like 3.9 million in damages or something like that?
That's right. Maybe it was. Maybe they just thought, well, this is a chance to kind of refill the police coffers, the coppers' coffers. But yeah, I mean, he's now won the defamation suit. I read a article in Jacobin magazine which says the Afroman ruling is a victory for artistic speech. So he's been kind of legitimately lauded as an important figure, and he's back on top. Presumably,
totally. Like, think of the fucking column inches he's getting. He can absolutely up his appearance fee. I saw him, he was interviewed on Vice or something some years ago, and he kind of explained how he was able to basically piggyback off the success of Because I Got High. He'd been able to forge this small career ever since then, and it's been his full-time job, and he's like an independent artist, and he does like loads of live gigs, and that's kind of how he makes his bread. And he's got a small little following, and he's big on social media. But yeah, talking about the Streisand effect, this Guardian article about the verdict was released. This is from we're recording today on Monday, the 30th of March. This Guardian article's from 11 days ago, the 19th of March. The Guardian article says the YouTube video for the song in question, Lemon Pound Cake, has 3.5 million views on YouTube. Today, 11 days later, it has 7.9 million views.
There you go.
So it has.
So
it's more than doubled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. There you go.
We should
totally
also put in we should also just so Lemon Pound Cake is a great song. Everybody should check it out. It's him singing about the incident to the melody of Under the Boardwalk, and one of the great lines in the song is Mama's lemon pound cake, it tastes so nice, it made the sheriff want to put down his gun and cut him a slice.
So good. Wonderful.
Yeah. Turn the
great.
tables on those cops.
As a lawman, it reminds me of a wonderful. There's a kind of a vein of cases which are all about the circumstances in which it's okay to insult, particularly like members of the police department or like law enforcement people, and that obviously they make for fun reading. And it's kind of it's the sort of 2026 version of that, obviously, because these sort of traditional cases are mostly from years ago and don't involve social media or the use of footage. But there's a famous one I was reminded of this morning, Coleman and Power for 2004, for all of our Australian constitutional law, DPTM, is out there, where a guy was handing out these pamphlets that said things like, said things about the police, that they were corrupt and, this and that, and then finished, for example, one of them finished by saying, boys, 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 I got witnesses, so kiss my ass, you slimy, lying bastards. And the police similarly in that case were like, went to court saying, you can't just hand out pamphlets calling us all bastards. And they, started off in the low courts, went all the way up to the High Court, and the High Court said, actually, yeah, you can, because it's political speech. And and Justice Kirby said something which I've always enjoyed about Australia, which was basically that it's always been part of our political discourse to be insulting. So he said, one might wish for more rationality, less superficiality, diminished invective, and increased logic and persuasion in political discourse. But those of that view must find another homeland. From its earliest history, Australian politics has readily included insult and emotion, calumny and invective in its armoury of persuasion. They are part and parcel of the struggle of ideas. Anyone in doubt should listen for an hour or two to the broadcasts that bring the debates of the Parliament to the living rooms of the nation. This is the way present and potential elected representatives have long campaigned in Australia for the votes of constituents and the support of their policies. It's unlikely to change. By protecting from legislative burdens, governmental and political communications in Australia, the Constitution addresses the nation's representative government as it is practiced. It does not protect only the whispered civilities of intellectual discourse, and therefore this provision which had outlawed insulting, quote unquote, invective was held to be read down in light of the Constitution. So there you go. Wow. Similarly in America, if you want to depict the sheriff as a kind of cake-addled, weak-willed chump, then that's your constitutional right. That's freedom, baby. So there you go.
That's a beautiful note to end on, John, and probably should also let people know that you have that Justice Kirby statement tattooed on your chest as a lawman, and when you go to the beach, you just have the whole thing scrolled on there.
Exactly. Just to quote, my whole chest and thighs are just quotes from my favorite High Court decisions. In like medieval cursive, copperplate Gothic.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, John. This has been a great episode on Cops on Cam, and we've really enjoyed it. If you've enjoyed Cops on Cam, Cops, I was seeing that as well. This for because I was thinking about a title for the episode, and I was thinking Cops on Cam, and then I was also doing the Duran Cops on Cam, Cops on Cam. Everybody, if you've enjoyed that episode, it would mean a lot to us if you could share the podcast with a friend or relative. It always makes a big difference. It's a grassroots cast, and if you think somebody might have enjoyed this, you can pause the episode right now and just hit share, and then you might use WhatsApp, you might use Messenger, Facebook Messenger. If you are a Gen Z, you probably use Snapchat. I've never used Snapchat. I don't know what it looks like trying to share a podcast in the Snapchat interface. Perhaps that's for you.
Send a snap of yourself listening to the podcast. Perhaps on
that's what you do.
Perhaps on your iPod. I don't know what people do these days. Discord or Signal. If you've been negotiating to import some Class A's, but you also want to suggest that your Belarusian colleagues might listen to the DPTM podcast, then by all means use one of those channels.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, everybody, and we can't wait to see you next week.
The podcast.